is on a Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening when you're dreading the week ahead, when Monday morning is right around the corner and you just don't want to go to work. You hate your job. And I haven't had that experience for many, many years, a couple of decades actually, but I've had that experience plenty, and it's one I'm glad to be rid of. Why do people hate their job? Well, I know statistically that 85% of you listening hate your job. And this is self-reported. All kinds of different studies show this. And there's lots of different reasons. For some of you, it's the commute, right? Your office is 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour plus away, and that commute just drives you crazy. For many of you, it's colleagues. You work with a bunch of people who are jerks, or they're mean, or they're so competitive that it's no fun. And probably very often there's a leadership problem as well, where there's no appreciation, there's no clear vision, there's no clear focus, nothing's ever good enough, nothing's on time. I think the most common reason, at least for me and for my staff when they're unhappy at work, is when there's no clear goal and there's no clear why behind the work. And what I mean by that is I think anything can really have meaning and purpose if there's meaning and purpose, meaning cleaning bathrooms and cleaning horse stalls and serving coffee and doing dishes. And I've done all of those jobs, by the way, that's why I'm mentioning them. Those can be totally menial, pointless jobs, or they can really have meaning and purpose depending on what your aim is. And a lot of that comes from top-down leadership and also the sector, and also just the meaning that you attach to the work that you do. And so cleaning toilets might be something that you find menial, but maybe you're cleaning toilets in an elder care facility and you're helping people transition into the last stage of their life with dignity, and maybe that brings you a lot of joy. I've cleaned plenty of toilets, by the way. I've done it professionally. And so how do you find meaning and purpose at work? How do you find work that's useful? And most importantly, right now, what do you do when you're working from home? And many of you listening right now are on an undefined homework telecommuting schedule, and it's really, really confusing. There's days when it's great. You get up late, you're still in your PJs, and you're having a cup of coffee, and you turn off the camera, and you just do audio on Zoom, and you kind of slide by with the morning meeting, and that feels kind of great. And then there's other days where you just feel all alone, and it just feels miserable. It feels inhumane to be working in isolation. It's a really difficult time. It's also an employer's market, not an employee's market, meaning jobs are scarce, unemployment is crazy high, record high all around the world. That's scary. That's scary for everyone. It's a difficult time. I'm hoping that this week's podcast helps you to think about happiness, meaning, purpose at work, and helps you to think strategically, even if you're in a job you dislike during these challenging times. If you're new here, it's the Lucas Rockwood Show. I'm your host. I'm a yoga teacher, a trainer, a serial entrepreneur. I'm a father of 3 international kids, but first and foremost, I'm a student. I like to learn. So I go out into the world of health and wellness and personal growth and development, and I try to find people who are studying in universities or writing books or sitting on a meditation cushion, and hopefully glean some insights from them and share them with you on this show. Hopefully it'll help us all live a more inspired life. If you like the show, here's what to do. Leave me a rating and review in whatever app you're listening to. Just scroll down and you should find some place to do it there. If you'd like to join my private Telegram group, you can actually message me directly. It's yogabody.com/students. We have a few thousand people in there chatting away every day. It's a cool place to be. And last but not least, if you want to find my teaching schedule, go to yogateacherscollege.com and you can see my upcoming course calendar. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy. So hello and welcome everybody. Today's show is called But What If Your Workplace is Toxic? And I'm joined here with Robert Glazer. Bob is the founder and CEO of Acceleration Partners, a marketing agency. He's a serial entrepreneur. He helps people and organizations build their capacity to elevate. His agency's won a whole bunch of awards, which I'm hoping to chat about today, including Glassdoor's Employees' Choice Awards 2 years in a row, Ad Age's Best Place to Work, Entrepreneur's Top Company Culture 2 years in a row, and Great Place to Work and Fortune Best Small and Medium Workplace 3 years in a row. So a whole bunch of different workplace awards. His writing has been featured in Forbes, in entrepreneur magazines. He shares his work in a Friday Forward email newsletter, which I'm a subscriber to, and he has a podcast of his own called Elevate. He's got a couple of books that you might find interesting. Friday Forward and his newer book, which we'll chat about today, is called Elevate. You can learn more at robertglazer.com. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me.
So you've got this marketing agency, but it seems like a lot of your time is spent on thought leadership and speaking about company and culture and purpose. Is that the main role that you see as the CEO of your company, or how did that come to be?
We focus a lot on what we do, but also how we do it. And I think, my role and the role that a lot of entrepreneurs play is really, trying to stay, not come up with good ideas, set the strategy, set the cultural tone, and then try to stay out of people's way. So I have a president who runs the day-to-day business with great sort of operations and business people. And that allows me to work on the stuff that I really enjoy, that I think I'm best at. And I think a lot of times people are actually, working outside of what it is they want to do. So, I'm passionate about how we do what we do and focusing on our culture and building our leaders. But as a services business, that's also really important to the product we deliver.
Company culture means different things to different people. And I have a business, and I've done a lot of work trying to figure out company culture. I get, it seems like it's about ping pong tables and free beer on Fridays. And, there's a couple of WeWorks down the street, and they do it kind of a different way. And I don't know. I spent so many years trying to figure this out. And I have a colleague, and he said, I don't know what company culture is, but let me just make the business the culture. And so I'll kind of bounce this back to you. How do you help think about culture in your company, and how do you help other people think about culture in terms of company culture specifically?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of different definitions. I think culture is how people in your company behave when you're not in the room. It's what are their actual behaviors. And you read off a bunch of the awards that we won. I always like to say I think there's some things we ostensibly think about a good culture, like paying people well and treating people well. But I actually think a really good culture is one that is consistent between what it thinks it says and it does. So its beliefs are the same thing it talks about, and that's actually how people act, and there's that alignment. So we've won a lot of these awards, but I think we're a great place to work for about 2% of people who are really aligned to that. Outside of those core things that companies have in common, it is having that differentiation and is just being really consistent. I think a bad culture is one where you say one thing and you do another, and the behavior, that's when you get distrust and backstabbing versus, look, there's some things that we value that people, when they don't do them or they don't do them well, there's some tough discussions around that.
And I've read the statistics, and I know anecdotally from my clients who are usually in transition career-wise. I run a professional yoga school, and people are usually transitioning from another career. People generally don't like their work, and the stats that I've seen is 80% plus. And I think that's probably pretty accurate. But I guess the question is, do you put the onus on the company? Do you put the onus on the employee? Is it shared? I mean, it can't all be that there's just terrible companies all around the place. There must be, terrible employees as well. How do you think about kind of joining in, mutual responsibility
right.
in terms of the work sucks conversation?
Yeah, look, I think that's true, right? There are some just bad employees out there, or some people who say, there's some companies who say, here are our values and those aren't them, or they just don't have any, and so it's inconsistent, so you don't know what good and bad is. But then there's employees too. When you say, look, here's what we value and here's what's important to us, and you're consistent about that, and people don't do it, or they don't do it consistently, then like in any system, there has to be sort of repercussions for that. So hopefully, though, if you keep hiring, like someone once said, he was responding to someone else's comment around we have this program called Mindful Transition to eliminate 2 weeks notice and just changing how people leave. And someone was talking about this and said, oh, you can't leave people around because they'll steal stuff and they'll this and, they'll act terribly. And he said, look, if you always have people stealing stuff or acting terribly from your business, then either one, you're hiring some pretty bad people, or two, there's something about your organization that's making them behave this way. There'll always be the exception, but if that's the rule, then I think you need to look a little deeper.
Yeah. So I'd like to chat a little bit. I've heard you speak on this 2 week, this weird trend that we have where it's just 2 weeks and you're done. In some cases, people have been working. Right now is a perfect time, and people are getting laid off all over the world, and they've been working in these places for 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, 20 years, and 2 weeks notice or no notice, they're just gone. I guess the challenge.
Well, the inverse is true too. Right before the pandemic, you had a lot of employees giving 1 day notice because the job market was so hot. Yeah.
Yes. True. You're exactly right. It goes both ways. So, I mean, as an employer, pre-COVID, I had about 34 employees, and we've lost about half of them. Quite a big transition. But just in 2020, I'm also not a fan of the 2 weeks notice. And I'll give you an example. I just had someone transition out of the company, and I gave her about 2 months notice, and she left on a really high note, left to a positive job. It was just a necessary change. And that was a happy story in 2020. And then I had another one, it was probably about 24 hours notice, and she just kind of went ballistic, aggressive, screaming, quite out of character, And so I've had staff now, I guess, for 18 years, and so I've had all different range of experiences, and I don't really know what to make of this. I love this idea of having people transition slowly, but I haven't been able to make it happen all the time. Sometimes people, I think that they're going to last a month, and I end up saying, hey, you know what, on Friday, let's just have that be your last day, and I pay them through the end of our month or the end of our term or their severance or whatever it is. But sometimes I just feel like when it's over, it needs to be over. So can you... This concept of your let's get beyond this 2 weeks notice thing is new to me, so maybe you can help myself and listeners understand a little bit more.
And to me, it's sort of reciprocal. So it's the company doesn't have tough discussions and lets people go and gives them notice, or the employees are always just giving 2 weeks notice. And because it's our failure to acknowledge that people just aren't going to work at companies forever. And so I think the solution actually starts before this. It starts with a very psychological safe environment where you say, hey, Lucas, or any employee, when you're not happy or you think you might want to do something else or whatever, come talk to us. And if you want to interview or you want to do something else, we're not going to walk you to the door. We're going to work on a plan. We can figure out a transition, timeline for you. And we can separate the fact that you want to work somewhere else and that we like you. But once you started with the doctor's appointments and then we're sort of headed down that path. And the inverse is also true, where the example you gave about that woman, I'm guessing that was sort of the last straw. We would probably start a discussion earlier on with someone and say, Sarah, this just doesn't seem like it's working. So we could go the performance route, but our experience is that just doesn't have a good outcome. Or we could help you find another job because we've tried this for a couple of months. It doesn't seem to be working. And it's just kind of bringing this more adult, open-ended discussion. And it doesn't always work, but I can tell you people like the truth. They like the respectful aspect of it. And we've had far more positive outcomes of this. We've had people on, 60-day transitions. We even had someone last year on a 5-month transition. And in those sort of cases, let's just say it's let's just pick a function like sales, because it wasn't. So you have a VP of sales, and you just know you need a chief revenue officer, right? And that person's just, you need a different set of capabilities, and they're not doing anything wrong. You might say to them, look, we're going to need a chief revenue officer. It's not going to be you. If you're okay with that, then you can work for that person. But if not, this is going to be kind of a 4-month process. I want to give you the heads up now so you can start looking around. And again, we can both get good outcomes. And we had exactly a sort of parallel to that. And the person that came in just with a different level of experience. And frankly, after a couple of years of huge growth, we needed that experience in that area. And they had both the experience and the capacity to do what we needed to do.
Yeah, I always try. I've said this to all my staff: team meetings, personal meetings, quarterly reviews, everything. If you ever want to transition out, come talk to me. I won't be angry. I'll help. And nobody's ever taken me up on it, not once. It's always the doctor. It's always the doctor's appointments, the sickness.
Well, they're used to that. I think you have to set the stage where a little bit, we're a little forceful, hey, we're creating this opportunity, we're creating the space. If you don't, you can call us out if we violate your trust, whatever. But if you don't do it, then sort of you've kind of violated our trust. And I don't think people realize about in the future on back channel references. We've actually kind of been more explicit about if you go the transparent route, what kind of support and help do you get? And kind of also showing them look, someone's going to call me in 3 years and ask for a reference. And what I'm going to remember is that you did this great work, but you weren't willing to have the conversation. And then you kind of lied and you left quickly. The last memory, unfortunately, is a powerful one.
I've heard you say that over 50% of employees are looking for a job at any time. I don't know if that's true in all industries, but can you speak a little bit to that? Because that's pretty depressing.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of studies around the lack of engagement and that people are looking. I mean, that probably is before this whole pandemic started. But that just shows you like what percentage of your employees are mentally out in the market not looking. There's a great phrase I like, that the people that quit and stay are far more damaging than the people that quit and leave. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to identify the people, who probably want to leave and help them leave, rather than having them be sort of zombie employees in our business for a year while they wait for something better.
And what is a zombie employee?
I mean, they're there, but they've already decided to leave. I mean, I had a friend who planned his departure for 18 months. He knew the date, he knew the vesting. They did not get the best work out of him, I'm sure, those last 18 months.
So we're at a completely unprecedented time right now. I have the smallest team I've had in 10 years. I laid off half my staff, and oddly, we're doing better than ever before. Not without about 2 months of me not sleeping and pulling my hair out and these kinds of things, but I'm curious how you're rethinking how you think about culture and communication and team and things in this, we can't say post-COVID world. It's just straight dead in the middle, or maybe we're even at the beginning, who knows. But how are you thinking about this now?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, I think we were growing a lot for a couple of years, and we were growing. We just threw money at problems and threw people at problems. And I think we probably were a lot more tolerant of people who were not a great fit, because we just needed the help. So we've gotten a lot more efficient. We've gotten a lot more reflective. We've leaned more into our core values. We've doubled on our communication. I think that one of the things that I've expressed, I think if you head into a crisis like this and you have some people that you think are good and some people you think are problematic, it's kind of like a cylindrical machine where like they either kind of like go to the outside and become terrible, or stick to the inside and become great when you apply a little bit of pressure. So it does really help you. We've had some people do some really surprising stuff, with stress and panic, and we've had some people do just unbelievable selfless, acts and, saying, hey, I want you to, if we need to come to it, I want you to lay off me before this person, or give that person my bonus because I think they need it more. So I think, it's easy in good times to have everybody, but you just really start to see like who you want in your foxhole, what's necessary. I think we've had a whole sort of different look on like what is essential, and essentialism, and like what is actually essential for our business versus where were we just kind of plugging growth holes. For
me, it's just been really interesting. Any business has a crisis every few months. Key employee leaves, a product gets discontinued, you have some kind of customer. There's always a major crisis, but this is totally different. This was a very unique stress test. I had one of my most trusted staff members just totally stole from me. Like, she stole my clients. She created a competitive product, like all right in the middle of COVID time. It was just bizarre. We lost half our team, and she stayed with. It's a very unique stress test. It really pulled the rug out. It brought out very different things in people than our other crises have.
I think the best,
very interesting.
The best and worst in peace.
Yeah.
Right. You go operating from scarcity or abundance, as your core. I think it shows that for sure.
So talk to us a little bit about your newest book. You've got this book out, and you're writing in general. When you're writing, whether it's your Elevate book or your articles, what are you hoping to inspire people with?
Yeah, I'm really trying to inspire people to be better and give them small, so my book's called Friday Forward, and it's based on a newsletter that I started to my team, which now reaches a couple 100,000 people around the world in 60 countries. There's one email every Friday, and it's about getting better through a formula, which is like, I actually think connection plus challenge equals change is a formula my friend introduced me to. But yeah, they're stories that kind of might help motivate you or inspire you, but they're not rainbow unicorn. They're things that people did that was difficult. They broke out of something. I like sort of taking the time to reflect on these things and share them and make people think, kind of ask a question. And so that's what Friday Forward is. It can be read in about 5 minutes, and it shows up at 7 a.m. Around the world for people on their inbox on Fridays, if it's wherever they've signed up.
And with your writing and your work in general, your books and things like that, what are you hoping to do in terms of messaging and inspiration? Because again, you've got this public advocacy, and then you've got your agency. How does it all tie in?
It's all the same thing for me. So I am, my personal core purpose is to share ideas that help people and organizations grow. So I'm doing that outside of work, but I'm doing that inside of work, and we're doing that within our industry to help other companies grow, focus on performance marketing. That's what's exciting to me. So when I figure out something that works for us that I think can help other people, I'm excited to share that. I like to open source it rather than to sort of keep it proprietary.
So you've won all these awards for workplace happiness and satisfaction at work and things like that. And, I think any company could probably, talk their way into 1 or 2 awards, but you've got too many. You've got to be doing something right. And so for people listening who are in a toxic workplace, and for people whose toxic workplace is now distributed, and that might be easing some of the toxicity, but still help people to think about how they can really productively think about their job, especially in this landscape of COVID-19, where maybe they disliked their job and they felt like they were underappreciated and lacked opportunity and growth and feedback, and now they're at home and they feel the same thing. Coming from somebody who's clearly created a company that's doing at least many things right, how would you help somebody think about that situation?
Yeah, I think we're very big on your personal core values and the things that are important to you need to ultimately align to your company's core values if you're going to be happy and engaged in the long run. You need to be doing meaningful work. So some people get stuck under a bad boss, and that can fix itself. Sometimes a good boss can shield a sort of toxic culture, but I would say that if it's really if it's really top-down toxicity, you kind of need to leave. I just haven't, I have some people, the CEO is a maniacal, crazy person, but, I love my team. And I'm like, well, but that's what's coming from the top down. And so that's going to prevail. So I think now actually when the water goes out, you see who's wearing their bathing suit. I actually think it's probably a better time than ever to take a look around at other companies and see who's doing well, who's treating their people well. When everything was doing well, I think it was easy to cover up a lot of the bad behavior. Yeah. A lot of the companies that will go under now, had bad business models, bad leaders. They were just doing a lot of things that they were getting away with for a while. And so I think it does make it a little easier as you're looking around to see like who's doing well and who's not.
What would you describe as a toxic workplace? Sometimes I feel like people are just complaining.
Yeah, to me, a toxic workplace is just unaligned. Like people are being pitted against each other. They're not working together towards common goals. Yeah. They're being told that one thing's important, but they're seeing people being recognized for another. So just it's always alignment to me. It's just not aligned. It's disingenuous. There's just poor leadership. People are attacked personally. I'm always amazed. We onboard clients and I sort of walk them through things. Some of the other companies, they were like competing against their fellow employees, not working with them. And I wrote this Friday forward on friendly fire because I was like, look, if you think the enemy is inside your walls, you have a very little chance of winning the war.
The biggest challenge that I have personally, and I've seen a lot of workplaces, is just accountability. So a company has values. I've got these company values. We spent so much time. And I'm pretty comfortable with them now. We had to go through a lot of bad to get to good. But the accountability part is where I get stuck, and I think a lot of founders and CEOs get stuck in terms of, okay, so we've got like one of my core values is mastery. This idea that you should get better at whatever you're doing. At the end of the year, you should be better than when you started. But I have a really hard time sitting down with somebody and saying, hey, you haven't really improved here. And I think that's pretty typical, probably not just in work but in life as well. Just really being honest when it's an uncomfortable conversation. How do you guys approach this, or how would you help somebody like me think about this?
Well, yeah, we have a version of a goal of value of excel and improve, which is similar. So the only thing I would argue there, I think, if you had done it right, you would have talked about that in the hiring process, the interview process. You would have screened that person around that. So we'll ask people, what courses have you taken? What book? If they haven't come up with anything in 3 years where they've improved or get better, we actually know that they don't meet the standard of that value. I think it's very hard to take someone into the company that isn't like that and try to make them like that. So this to me is, I think it starts at the beginning. I think you may have some people where the DNA is not the match you're looking for, and it's going to be hard to force that.
How do you deal with accountability in your organization? For example, are you guys doing annual reviews? Are you doing biannual reviews? How do you?
Yeah, we do quarterly check-ins, but all of people's to-dos are fundamentally public. So we have dashboards with quarterly to-dos, people's top 5 metrics. you can see mine, I can see other people. So we inject a lot of accountability into the system. It's very rare that someone actually has to tell you, you're not doing your job, because I think it's really clear when you're not doing your job.
We're at a really difficult time now where even people listening to this are going, they're nodding their head and they're saying, I got to get out of my job. It's an employer's market, not an employee's market. And so people are staying in bad relationships. They're staying in bad jobs.
Yeah.
They're just in crisis mode, for better or for worse. And I guess my concern is this crisis might last a really long time. We could be talking about a couple of years here. How can somebody still, choose themselves, put their needs and their, finding meaning and purpose and support and a successful workplace, even in a time right now which feels very dangerous to step outside the lines at all?
Yeah, look, some people made their bed by jumping jobs 6 times in a row with 1 week notice and not building that network. And so, those networks are what people are going to find their job on. And I think not necessarily loyalty, but the right type of behavior. So I would really start to think about building the relationships, networking with the people and companies you want to get into, do the long work. I think employment's become so transactional, and I think it's going to move back to being more relationship oriented. Unfortunately, there's not a quick fix. The best time to have done something was usually, before you needed to do it. And another reason why we're really trying to eliminate the 2 week notice thing, I think, you could have jumped 6 years in a row to different jobs, given no notice, and just the market never punished you for it. Now you have 6 ex-bosses and companies that wouldn't hire you back, right, or wouldn't give positive references. So, yeah, it's going to take some time to do that. But I would really be leaning into relationships more than ever.
And how do you see the generational stuff? You and I are similar age. How do you see older people versus younger people in terms of job hopping and job loyalty in general?
Yeah, look, the companies aren't as loyal. And then, I'm sort of we try to acknowledge that it's not employee for life.
Yeah.
And that changes the narrative. But yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of people start to think more about, just because these guys are offering me $3,000 more, is it worth it? Is the company better? Do I want to ask them questions? I think people are going to look a little more holistically depending on their experience. And also realize, just because it's been a rough 5 months, we see people switching companies a lot now. It's been a rough 5 months everywhere. Don't assume that going in right now somewhere else and being last in, it's going to be better than where you were. It's been stressful everywhere. So I do see I think some people are going to make some grass is greener mistakes there.
Well, good. And how are you personally dealing with communication in your team during this COVID period? I assume you guys are all distributed. How are you communicating with everybody? Yeah,
we were distributed. More communication. I've done a lot of asynchronous video, a lot more. People don't need to get on the call to listen to me, and it takes an hour to write an email. So I'll record a video, I'll send an update. That's been pretty popular, and I think it provides a lot more sort of context than, just an email.
Bob, I appreciate you coming on the show. For people who listen, who want to get on your newsletter, follow you, check out your books, where should we send them?
Yeah, they can check out robertglazer.com, glazer.com. They can sign up for Friday Forward, find the books, learn about the podcast. And if you're interested in learning more about what we do in our company, Acceleration Partners, rather than spelling it, it's probably easier to Google accelerationpartners.com, and you'll find us there.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate your time, and let's keep in touch. We're living through the most uncertain times in my lifetime, probably in your lifetime too. And what this means is that your average person is experiencing levels of stress that are unprecedented. Most of us don't have the best tools in our toolkit to deal with stress. We have red wine and Netflix and Haagen-Dazs, maybe a yoga class we love, maybe a cycling class or a CrossFit WOD or something like that, but all of us right now need more tools. Yoga breathing is a very, very powerful stress mitigation tool that very few people are using. The good news is that yoga breathing is very accessible, it's very predictable, and it can be really used by anybody at any age, at any stage of practice all around the world. Many of you have seen my TED Talk, Change Your Breath, Change Your Life, has 1.4 million views or something like that. So the interest in yoga breathing has never been bigger. And that's why right now I'm certifying yoga breath coaches. And what our breath coaches do is they work one-on-one primarily with students to help them manage stress, to balance their energy, to sleep better, and to improve their quality of their life. Now, our coaches work one-on-one. Some of them also do group sessions in yoga studios or virtually via Zoom, and some of them go into corporate situations as well. They do wellness talks. It's a high demand profession. It's very simple to get started. The course itself is live and interactive. It's 12 days long. I walk you step by step through the anatomy and physiology of breathing. I'll walk you through the business and the marketing. I'll integrate 6 core practices that you'll use in your coaching sessions. We'll give you all the session plans, emails, follow-up sessions, and everything that you need to go from zero to your first paying client. It's an exciting program. I couldn't be more excited to share this with you and my community. If you'd like to learn more, please go to breathcoachtraining.com. This week's nutritional tip comes from Betsy on Instagram. Lucas, I have restless leg syndrome. It's driving me crazy. Do you know of any nutritional supplements, vitamins, or even water that I could use that would help? Restless leg syndrome is incredibly common and it's pretty mysterious. Nobody knows exactly what causes it, but what people do know is that certain things help certain people. So that's what I can share with you. I had restless leg syndrome for a long time and it still comes back, and I don't really know why. My theory is that restless leg syndrome is actually not just one thing. I think it's actually multiple things. I think for some people, stress and anxiety triggers it. For other people, exercise, fatigue. For other people, lack of magnesium. That's my guess, because it's very, very common and pretty hard to pin down in terms of what's going on. But there's this urge to move your legs. So people will flex and point their toes. They'll kind of claw with their feet in the bed. What I tend to do when I'm sleeping, and I get it, is I'll point my toes so firmly that my calves will actually cramp. So I'll wake up with a Charlie horse. It's really uncomfortable. In terms of nutritional stuff, my biggest suggestion is to take 400 milligrams of magnesium citrate before bed. Magnesium is one of the more abundant one of the more abundant minerals rather in the world and in our bodies. It's available in all kinds of things like dark chocolate, nuts and seeds, and green vegetables, but many people are low in magnesium. Maybe not deficient, but low. Magnesium relaxes you. It helps you go to the bathroom, so it's a great thing to take at night. Now, will it fix your restless leg syndrome? It's not that simple. For some people, yes. For some people, no. But give that a try. So 400 milligrams of magnesium citrate. And then other sleep hygiene things for some people can be really helpful. So trying to cool down the temperature of your room, playing around with pillows, trying to sleep on your side if at all possible, getting blackout curtains, getting rid of electronics, all the basic sleep hygiene stuff for some people can help as well. My final suggestion is not a nutritional tip, but you might want to play around with some whiskey category breathing practices like the ones we teach. And those would be any practice where you breathe less than 4 breaths per minute. So 3 breaths per minute or slower. You can find those if you go to yogabody.com/how to breathe. You can find a little PDF tutorial that walks you through that. Hope that's helpful. This week's listener question comes from Carl on Instagram. Carl says, Lucas, I saw your post about wearing a mask and oxygen levels. Why did you have to get so political? Can't you just talk about yoga? So I thought I'd take a moment to answer this question for 2 reasons. Number one, I'm not political at all. I don't know why people think wearing a mask makes you a Democrat or not wearing one makes you a Republican. I am not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat either. And wearing a mask has nothing to do with that. I moved to Southeast Asia in 2003, and this was right after SARS, and everybody was wearing masks, and I thought it was the weirdest thing ever. And turns out that SARS experience throughout Asia really was amazing training for how to deal with infectious disease. And in Japan, in China, in Thailand, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, people have no problem putting on masks anytime throughout the year. If they're sick or if someone around them is sick, it's not a big deal at all. So when COVID happened here in Spain, I started wearing a mask in March, and I wear one all the time, and I don't care at all. It doesn't make me a Democrat. It doesn't make me a Republican. You can have political fights on some other platform. I'm here to talk about masks and breathing. The biggest misconception is that masks somehow cut off your oxygen. I've seen people, on talking to their local government saying that they're dying for air and this kind of thing. And the reason I made that post on social media is to share the reality. I took a blood oximeter and I measured my blood oxygen, and it doesn't change at all when I wear a mask. And in fact, there's a really big benefit to wearing a mask, which is you actually increase your CO2 levels. A lot of people think that we're starving for oxygen all the time in the way that we might be starving for vitamin D or starving for omega-3 fats. It's not like that. The ambient air right now in your house is probably just under 21% oxygen. And the reality is we don't even need that much oxygen, right? You can go up to high altitudes where the oxygen level is even lower and you're just fine. You might get a little headache at first. And so it's not like we're running around starving for oxygen-rich air. What we need to do is absorb the oxygen that we already have, and we also need a good balance of gases, specifically O2 and CO2. When we talk about yoga breathing, which of course I rant on a lot about here, and we have lots of guests talking about CO2 and yoga breathing, CO2 is really a major factor in the relaxation response, in vasodilation, bronchodilation, and interestingly enough, as outlined by the Bohr effect, your increased CO2 levels actually help you to absorb more oxygen. Now, all of this sounds like a bunch of nonsense, so let me break it down for you. Let's say you're wearing a blue surgical mask, like most of you are wearing, and you check your blood oxygen. You see it's somewhere between 95 and 99%, like almost everybody is. But you say, Lucas, I feel different. I feel a little weird. Well, that's because your CO2 levels have gone up. And when you're first learning to tolerate CO2, it does feel a little bit weird. It takes you a little bit of time to adjust. But as you adjust, there's really big benefits to increase CO2. As I mentioned, bronchodilation, vasodilation, relaxation, and greater absorption of that oxygen that you already have in your blood. So what kind of mask should you wear? Well, N95 masks seem to be the best in all of the different tests that I've seen, but a very close second is the surgical mask, and I find them way more comfortable and cheaper and easier to find and easier to keep in my backpack. Coming after that is like a polycotton mask, but they're not very standardized. And so some of them are made out of random fabric. Some of them are made out of really thick fabric. So my go-to is the surgical mask, but I will wear an N95 too. But the surgical masks are really great. And there's plenty of people who have done this research. It's not just me. I just share ideas that I collect out in the wild. But there's a British doctor. His name is Tom Lawton, and he went running for 22 miles with a mask on, and he just kept checking his oxygen levels. And same thing, he never dipped down below 95%. In fact, I think he was around 97% the whole time. These masks don't change your oxygen levels, but they will change your CO2. Let me share with you another way that this works. So you've seen in the movies, right? There's an accident on the side of the road, and the person is having a panic attack, and the paramedic gives the person panicking a paper bag. Why would they breathe into a paper bag? Why wouldn't they give that person pure oxygen? Well, they're already breathing too much, right? When they breathe too much, it constricts their breathing passageways, creates stress and anxiety. Instead, they give them a paper bag. They breathe into that paper bag, and what happens? Well, they get more CO2, and that CO2 relaxes them, opens up their breathing passageways, and helps them to absorb that saturated blood oxygen that they already have. So that's my little rant on masks. I'm a big fan. I think it's really helping the entire world train their CO2 tolerance, which any breathwork person is really into, whether you're into freediving, whether you're into Buteyko breath, or you're a breath coach, whether you're doing traditional pranayama, whatever you're working with. CO2 training is a major, major part of that, and most people never learn it, but now because of these masks, almost everybody is increasing their CO2 tolerance. How can you tell if you have increased your CO2 tolerance? Well, for me, I live on a 4th floor, and I have an elevator, but I usually walk up because, well, I want to walk up the stairs while I can. Someday I won't be able to walk up them, so at 42 I can easily walk up the stairs, so off I go. And when COVID first happened, when I walked up the stairs with a mask, I really could feel it. I could feel different at the top of those 4 flights of stairs. It took about 2 weeks and I don't feel anything. It doesn't feel any different at all. Very, very quickly, you'll build up your CO2 tolerance. Now again, it hasn't affected the oxygen content of my blood at all, but as I'm able to get more comfortable with that increased CO2, I'm able to absorb more of the oxygen I have, and I'm able to be more relaxed as I'm moving around. That's my little rant on masks. Nothing to do with politics. I don't know why a surgical mask became political. I don't know why anybody would suggest masks don't work. If you wonder about covering your mouth, if that's really helpful, I would encourage you to go in your grandmother's kitchen and just sneeze all over the food and see what happens. I think you'll probably get the back of the hand to your face, and someone will yell at you and tell you to cover your mouth. So I think this is pretty good. I don't know why we need any more research on covering your mouth. pretty good indication that it does something. That's my little rant on masks. Hope that's helpful. Thanks for listening to The Lucas Rockwood Show. If you enjoy the podcast, I have 2 asks of you. Number 1, share the show on social media with your friends and tag me. My handle is @LucasRockwood. Number 2 is please leave a rating and review in whatever app you're listening on. And last but not least, before you go, if you'd like to be on my mailing list, every week I send out information about the podcast, behind the scenes stuff, announcements of online classes and special events. I email about once a week. You can do that at yogabody.com/sign me up. And right now we have a free breathing worksheet on that page as well. It's yogabody.com/sign me up. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.